And live from Brussels, it's ZN Live. That's right. And today is an exceptional day for a number of reasons. It's our last ZN Live before the EU Influencer event on Tuesday. And we have an exceptional guest, Andrew Stroehlein, who is going to be in person. You could get to meet him there on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about a number of topics. Some of them we already started discussing online on X, platform formerly known as Twitter. So I want to start with that because this is a discussion that's very much top of mind with many people in the bubble. That's why we've seen a lot of discussion online about it. So Andrew, where are you now on the future of X, which everybody is enthusiastically hating, but not quite abandoning?
Yeah, well, I think there's a kind of a false dichotomy that people put out there. Are you staying on Twitter X or are you leaving Twitter X? What do but I think what's really happening is overall, if you look at on averages, people are just there less. And I should make a point that what I'm talking about, and I think what you're talking about as well, is how this platform, how Twitter or X or whatever is used, here in Brussels, inside the bubble, or in EU and maybe even member state, political conversation generally, right? That's really a smallish subset of what Twitter ever was, right? So I don't know what's going to happen to, say, other subsets of Twitter. So, entertainment Twitter or sports Twitter or all the other different sort of places, but what I see on the platform now is that people are spending less time there. They're reacting less to the kind of messages that that we're putting out and that I'm interested in. They are maybe coming to just check a few things and then hop off again, but you don't see them engaging in discussions. You don't see them liking, retweeting, commenting. You don't see as much of that as you used to. And I just think there's a frustration with the platform, and people have many reasons to like the platform less. And some of those, frankly, predate Mr. Musk, and and he's accelerated a lot of processes since he's taken over that have really just made the platform, I would say, worse, and certainly for me and for what I'm trying to do, just a lot less important.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and maybe we're going to see, a mutation from Twitter to X, and X would become more of a background publishing place where people just put stuff out, and it's just okay for reference, but no longer for engagement. And so I think, again, the shape of X is actually, I guess, the big question, because it was so central to the EU before. Now, you have been working across different platforms, and I just want you to give us a sense of how does Mastodon compare with X in terms of engagement? And maybe for a question that Harold Tor put on X, actually, is where do you think the policymakers are hanging around nowadays?
Yeah, well, this is the good question. This is what I'm on the hunt every day for where they all are. I think Mastodon's been interesting. There's a huge rush to Mastodon. Well, there's been a couple rushes, but especially just about a year ago, when it was very clear that Musk had taken over, and there was just this, it was quite a big exodus. I think I got about 10,000 followers on Mastodon, within the space of 6 weeks or something like that. It was really just astounding. The engagement on Mastodon since then has been, for me, pretty good. It's been better than Twitter, where I have 125,000 followers, but I see very little engagement on the exact same messages. So you can put something on Mastodon, you put something on Twitter, at more or less the same time, and you see lots of people responding, replying, sharing on Mastodon that you don't see in Twitter. A lot of it has to do with the way the algorithm works, and that because there's fewer people kind of engaging, that means the algorithm is not sort of sending your tweet to more people. On Mastodon, your posts get seen by everyone. So I have greater engagement on most things on Mastodon than I do on Twitter, even though the follower numbers are different. The only issue, I think, with Mastodon is that I don't see the same journalists, the same policy makers, the same decision makers that I used to see on Twitter, and maybe not a year ago, but let's go back on Twitter 3-4 years ago. It's not the same. I think there are policy niches on Mastodon. So if you are very interested in the transport policy of the European Union, and the people who are talking about that, you can find that niche there. You can find your professional soulmates there on Mastodon. But for wider issues or trying to contact journalists, I haven't found it to be the most effective platform yet.
I have a question, Andrew. You mentioned that you are posting the same content on Twitter X and
generally the same, yeah.
Just to experiment a little bit, but you're also on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn. How do you keep on top of all these channels? Because of course that means you need to spend even more time on social media. How can you maintain this presence on all the channels?
Yeah, well, I think this is the problem we're all having now. We're all trying to diversify the number of platforms we're on and try to get the message out all over, because honestly, we're all just experimenting. We don't know where that our time is most useful. 3, 4, or 5 years ago, I would have said easily, an hour on Twitter is worth the what I'm spending. Now I'm spreading that hour across 4 or 5 platforms. I spend most of my day doing my human rights daily brief, which is a daily newsletter about human rights issues around the world, and that's a newsletter format which we kind of developed even before this sort of shift in Twitter, because we saw the shifts in social media coming. So that's where I spend the most of my time, and then to kind of promote some of the issues in that, to promote the newsletter, to help to share other things that people are doing. I try to spend a little time on each of these ones that we're mentioning, on Blue Sky and on Mastodon. So I'll try to get maybe 3 posts on each of those every day, and then Twitter, if I can, it would be more or less the same. I also jump on T2 every now and then, which is very small but kind of worth keeping an eye on. And then LinkedIn, I find LinkedIn, I have a sense that LinkedIn's going to be, it already is, but it's going to be increasingly important for the kind of EU policy bubble, because the kind of career policy wonky sort of types that that folks are in this city, it's a kind of a natural fit, I think.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is. Sorry, go ahead. Was this?
Yeah, sorry, not just in relation to this, not only on the fact that you create content, but also on consume content or get information. It's true that in the past, like you say, 3 years ago, you were going to a place, and then in that place you were getting more or less all the information, all the communication also from policymakers, key opinion leaders, and all that on one place at the same time. So it was much quicker, much easier. You just had to put the notifications and all that. Now it requires that then what? We need to start researching, checking where is the conversation, each one of the topics, and all that's how
no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. On the one hand, it's kind of exciting because everybody's experimenting and trying to figure out what's what, but it's frustrating and more time consuming. Absolutely. Like you have to, we don't know what works. I mean, hopefully there'll be a sort of a gradual learning and a shakeout, and we'll learn what works where. And I don't expect there to be one answer to all the questions when the shakeout is finally shook out. I expect us to see, maybe in this member state on this issue, this platform is kind of king, and in this member state, on this issue, this other one is king. And I imagine we're going to be spread across a lot of platforms for a while, but at least we'll start to know what works on what issue where.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. You mentioned transport, and John Worth, who's obviously gone all in for Mastodon. And I think this kind of micro niche where you say, okay, I have a topic and a bunch of people I want to talk to, and then, which is going to happen across the different platforms. Now, I find the newsletter, however simple it is, a really interesting, very powerful idea, because it brings together your thoughts. And I think it's kind of like a deeper writing process, which you can then spread across different channels. So assuming your newsletter is the core story, then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to put a little quote here, and why not cut and paste this? If the platforms look the same, I can put a similar kind of piece of content across them, and then, as you said, let's see what kind of engagement I get, and then I get more of those conversations. So I think that could become a real anchor, because it's about content and ideas, and then those channels become places to spread.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's kind of my thinking right now in the way I'm using all of these different platforms, is sort of with the flagship of my daily newsletter. Like that's where the newsletter is where the ideas are. It's where the longer kind of arguments are, and it's where some of the detail is. It's still pretty short. I mean, the main story, I try to make it about 300, 400 words. It's not super long, but we're seeing, I think, especially like for policymakers and journalists, like 300, 400 words is not terrifying, and it gets across the main message. And I don't think for other people outside those immediate policy circles, like that's an extremely long piece of text, and people like a little bit more of the detail if they want to dig into some of the issues a little bit more. So I think like that's some of the superficiality of other social media platforms generally, I would say, has been frustrating for a lot of people, and people want a little bit more. Like, it's kind of fun to have a little quip here and a response and reply, a snappy comeback, but that's entertaining, but it's not fulfilling. They're empty calories in a sense.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, hello to Sebastian and to Justin and Gaia. And I think this is interesting, because we've been complaining about our short attention spans. We're all turning into goldfish because of the internet. And then now we're starting perhaps to write better and more. Again, the things that people just do not expect can happen. And I think we might see a trend towards quality. I mean, I personally find myself drawn to good quality newsletters and better articles, because it's like, okay, people can write wonderful tweets, but honestly, I find it much more exhausting to try to say something really short and snappy than to say, look, let me unpack my thought and have a real conversation. So I think it's a good thing. Now, you talked about this, painful fragmentation that we are experiencing right now. The thing is that, this is not a time when we can sit back and go, hey, let's just wait and see, because the election's coming up. Right. So most people have to look at what's being said and prepare their own communication. So, given what you know about Brussels and the EU, and the time it took for Twitter to become mainstream, and now it's like, oh my God, we have to rethink things all over again. And we took 10 years to accept that social media was a thing, that Twitter was a thing. How do you think the bubble is going to adapt to this in this moment when they have to do it? They don't have a choice.
Yeah, I think your question sort of is answered inside the question itself. The adaptation was not super speedy in Brussels of Twitter, and while everybody's looking around for what's next or what works, I think there's going to be a lot of arguments, a lot of waiting to see. So a lot of people will just stand by. They'll do a little bit here, a little bit there, but they're going to wait to see what other folks do, and where the kind of where the key for them journalists go, or where the key policymakers go. And then once they see them there, then they'll gravitate towards them, and we'll have these small in some cases it might be quite small micro niches, as you say, where people are discussing this policy in this language. That's something we don't talk about quite too often, is we like the multiplicity of languages, and how some of them could be over on one platform, and another could be useful on another. I mean, Facebook is still important in some countries. I mean, Facebook is the internet in some countries. So it's like, even though Facebook's kind of been out of the mix for us for quite a while, and what we're concerned with, it still happens. And that maybe that's what we'll see with Twitter. Twitter may just be still like the best thing and the most important thing in country A, but not in country B.
Now we've got the election coming up, and people are talking a lot about misinformation. So what do you think Are you concerned about this more than last time? Because in a sense, we've had this conversation. We kind of know what misinformation looks like. Now, some people say that AI is going to make it much worse. Do you believe that? And what are your big concerns for the election?
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about misinformation. I think we saw in the last election, and we've seen in other elections how things have been manipulated. In a way, it's nothing new, but new tools are constantly coming in and being used and have to be kind of monitored. I think some of the misinformation from some external sources is better known now than it was before, and I think there's many more eyes on it now. But there's always like a cat and mouse, right? And you're always trying to catch up to the new tricks. So I wonder who is out there, and it's a serious question. I'd love to know, like, who's out there monitoring abuses of AI specifically for political purposes or for elections specifically. That would be really interesting for me to know. Like for us, I think the bigger issue for the next year, which is a really big elections year, 2024, in a whole lot of places, we're increasingly seeing political parties and specific individual politicians that are really against the very concept that underlines what we do, universal human rights. We have a fundamental human rights that we all share, values upon which the European Union is based, and we're seeing so many voices now really just kind of ignore that, undermine that, and want to essentially eliminate that in favor of whatever nationalistic or ethnic or race priorities that they have. And that's extremely worrying. It's been worrying for many years, don't get me wrong, but that's kind of, if I had a top concern for the upcoming elections in the whole year, I think it wouldn't be any particular tool of disinformation or misinformation that folks are using or might use. It's this wider, broader concern of what we're hearing people and some politicians say.
So it's the narrative, not necessarily
narratives, exactly.
Inherently, yeah, it's a story, not necessarily misinformation.
Yeah, it's the content that worries us, not the delivery system.
Absolutely. Yeah, but it'd be interesting to see the relationship between the platforms. Whether a fragmentation makes that worse because people tend to hang around in places where they feel more comfortable with the narrative.
Differentials, Phil, in moderation might push certain groups in certain directions as well, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of discussion about the increasingly lax moderation, it seems, at Twitter, X, and maybe that means a certain type of voter or citizen goes there, and it kind of gets the reputation for that, and so fewer and fewer people go because, well, why would I want to go spend my time there? All those people, they're not thinking like us. And then maybe another platform is a little bit more open or free, or has different maybe even prejudices or values that kind of make their audience or their users kind of in their own. I mean, we used to talk about people living in bubbles, right? Like on social media and whatnot. I think the situation or the threat of that, I never worried about the threat of that too much. But now I am, actually, because of this sort of micro niching of folks into different platforms in different places and different groups. It's much more of a concern now, I think.
Yeah, and I think maybe, going back to the newsletter thing, this idea of actually spending more time reflecting on what you're saying and writing it out. It was, I mean, again, this is me being optimistic, but if you make people think and pause and try to actually articulate what they want, that might lead to more nuanced and more perhaps collaborative outcomes. Then the kind of like just hit them hard with a highly emotional message and just try to get as much clickbait as clicks as you can.
It gets beyond the sloganeering of politicians as well. It's like you can dig down and say, well, let's you have to be very careful about not thinking of an elephant, but you can just introduce topics in completely different ways. And that's one of the things we try to do. I mean, human rights can have a reputation in certain media markets for being, one thing or the other, and people don't like it because they have a misunderstanding about what human rights are. And if we can approach it with a totally new and different language in the newsletter, and it seems to be working. We had 22,000 subscribers in January, and now we've got 55 something thousand, and that's not bad. I'm quite happy with that. With it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing because it's not just an audience; it's an audience that wants to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely,
it's very different from followers who might or might not read your content.
Right.
And so I would say at least one thing, because for Tuesday we. Again, this is all about trying to kind of shape an idea of what might happen next, and what communicators who are, basically responsible and want to have constructive dialogue are engaged in. It's like, okay, well, if you spend more time on better content, you might actually have a more positive contribution, whatever your opinion, because I mean, we have to recognize we're still going to have a lot of different opinions. But if you want good dialogue, good conversation, you need that time. And by the way, I think that the misinformation might be like again, I hate doing this because if I replay this clip in a year's time, it might look terrible. But I think that it's a bit of a 2000, the bug scare, which is like, we're all scared about misinformation because we experience it so much. And I get the feeling that actually we've almost started to inoculate ourselves against it, because we know that weird viral stuff is generally wrong. And we just, so that's why I think it might just not be the biggest problem we face. Who knows?
No, I hope that's right. I would like to think that people have been learning because they've been spending so much time on social media, and they see, okay, well, they're more, not everybody, obviously, but a lot of folks are much more skeptical about what they read. I mean, the one problem I see, which is, is that people don't think that like anything they read is true, right? They're like, it goes the opposite direction, where they say, okay, well, I just can't believe anything I see at all anymore, and I don't really trust anyone, and that's really damaging for society and for politics as well, because then it basically just politics simply becomes, I like my guy, and my guy's the right guy, and he says all the right stuff, and everybody else says is wrong, because it's simple, right? It's a very
I think, I mean, we are gravitating towards that, I think, in the sense that you have your reference points, the writers, the thinkers, the people that you believe in. But I think the more those people in general spend time unpacking what they say, rather than just kind of fighting on a highly emotional narrative, that I think will improve the conversation. And I think that, we have a lot of resources now that can help you to describe what is misinformation, a checklist of the 5 things you need to do when check the source. Okay, it might be your crazy uncle, so maybe you love your uncle and you believe that, but at least you know where it's coming from. And this is a conversation I have with some people about, like, don't send me that thing on WhatsApp if you don't know where it's coming from. I mean, just not just the video and, oh my God, look at that. It's like, who posted this? Why did they do it? What are they trying to say? So I think that's something that we have to keep drilling into the conversation. Now, when you're talking to communicators and young people today, and especially now in this moment, what's your kind of big advice to them? It's like, what do you think they need to be doing differently now, and especially in that election period?
Yeah. That's a really difficult one. I mean, I wouldn't know how to advise, whatever 25-year-old me. What would I tell myself? Well, I mean, I wasn't even in any of this business when I was 25. So, my usual advice to young people is, don't start a career in Brussels in your 20s. Like, Brussels is a great town when you have a family and you're older and you have a career and whatnot. Like, go out and explore the world, get a job, somewhere else, and experience life for a bit before you settle down. But I think on communications, in communications terms, I think the advice is, spread yourself out, experiment, see what works for you, find as best you can the subset of folks you really want to talk to, right? Like that you don't really, I mean, in the kind of policy bubbles, like we don't necessarily want to talk to everybody in the world, right? We want to maybe have an expert conversation, and then there's other formats, other platforms for reaching a wider audience. But in those policy discussions that are public, like, find out where those are happening in your area and jump into them and listen and watch, and and then when you have something to say, be seen and join in, right? I guess that's the only advice I could give.
Fantastic. So Justin, who is a young person thinking about Brussels, saying, "Is it that bad?"
Is what that bad? Brussels? No, Brussels is great, but I mean, I think it's a great place to raise families. It's a great place to have a career where you can do something meaningful for the world. But when you're young and you're unencumbered by kids and mortgages and everything else, and you maybe have an opportunity to do something different, if you're not burdened by student debt, then do that. Then get out. Like this is the chance for you to live somewhere else, learn a different language, learn a non-European language. That
Great.
looks so much better on a CV. We put out a post, we post a job or an internship. We get 1,000 people applying, and the people, they're very, very similar applications. A lot of them are very similar CVs, but the people who spent a little time somewhere interesting, I know we're going to have some kind of experience that is going to, they're going to be a more interesting person to work with. They're going to have a much broader view of the world. They're going to have much more better understanding of the world because they've actually, been out in it.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people in Brussels actually like to travel, so they come from different places. I think that's what makes it very rich.
Yeah.
And Sebastian said Brussels is for old guys, and Guy says, shall I reconsider moving? You'll meet Guy on Tuesday, so we'll be able to discuss that. I want to go to our recommendations now, so cue jingle. So I think, Andrew, you had a book recommendation.
Oh, yes, book recommendation. Sorry. I take it on the back. So I'm recommending The Burgundians by Bart van Loo. And so it's a really excellent book on that sort of looks at the history of this part of the world in kind of a different way, rather than kind of from some of the perspectives that you might have been used to in national curricula. And for anybody who lives in Brussels, should read the book, because it has such great little factoids about Brussels and how it used to be in back several centuries ago. So well recommended.
Fantastic.
And well written, I should say, as well. I mean, the translation is good and everything. So
excellent. Iran, do you have a recommendation for us this week?
I don't have a recommendation specifically. Maybe for those people that are watching and still haven't signed up for EU Influencer, we have our event coming up in less than a week. So my recommendation would be for you guys to sign up and see you there.
Excellent. Jesus, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, for me, what I wanted is to give a shout out to our creative team. I'm looking inside also because we have created a really cool survey. Sometimes surveys look like a bit boring and all that, and I think in this case we made something with a lot of fun. Actually, it's a survey talking about new trends, digital trends, asking about how do you see a lot of part of the discussion that we have been running, and actually it's under the theme of Barbie movie, so it's really fun. So I suggest the guys, if you can, check it there and fill in because it's fun just doing it. So
thank you, Jesus. And I'm going to go to my recommendation. Before that, Justin is asking a question to Andrew. So I'm just going to give you, if you want to learn a non-European language, which one would it be? It's very
that's really hard. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Whatever. Pick a language in a place where you want to live, right? For a year or two, because if you're learning a language in a place that's kind of, let's say, cold and miserable, maybe you wouldn't want to. I have a friend, a dear friend, who learned Russian and then realized that, oh dear, here I am, and I've got to deal with these winters.
Yeah.
So pick a language of a place you like, and a culture that interests you, and a place that you can, see yourself, sort of having some kind of interest in over the longer term.
Yeah, I'm trying to go back to my Hindi because I spent some time in India, so that's on my to-do list, going in and out of it. My recommendation is actually a course on YouTube from Stanford. I've discovered these wonderful lecture series that professors are posting from different places, and this is actually by Robert Sapolsky. It's about human behavioral biology, but it's a lot more than that. It's kind of a lot of theories of behavior, and it's like, I think, a 20-part lecture, and it's literally all the lectures that are there. So if you're interested in learning something that you did, that you could have learned when you were at uni, some great topics. This one is very funny, entertaining, and again, it's filmed from the lecture hall, so it's not some kind of over-edited thing. And this one's quite old, actually. It's like from 2011, but I think there's still some great quality there. So that's my recommendation. In the meantime, have a fantastic but very, very warm weekend. Temperatures, I think, rising all the way to 31, 32. So I think the hottest in recorded history for this period of the year. It'll be cooler on Tuesday, which is great. So that way, we won't be boiling in the venue. It'll be fantastic. Andrew, looking forward to continuing this conversation in the room, online. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and advice. It's incredibly insightful.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.